Hello, my friends. Welcome back to some more Space Marine 2. We spent 2 hours trying to beat the Lictor. We failed. We spent 4 hours playing the multiplayer to try and farm levels to get to rank 23 so that we can use the plasma cannon. We failed. We only got to rank 8. We returned, spent another hour on the Lictor on max difficulty, still kept failing. So I gave up. I turned the difficulty down from Angel of Death to just hard. We talked a little bit about some of the issues with why I'm not going to show the multiplayer of Space Marine 2 and why I'm not going to show my glitchy 3-hour fuckfest with the Lictor. You might as well just insert Elden Ring footage because that's basically what it was. It was just me getting one shot over and over again for basically 3 hours. Today we return to the single player campaign. We turned it down, we beat the Lictor, and we killed the Raveners with the barbed stranglers, because barbed stranglers hurt. And now we're here. We're inside Nozick's facility. And inside Nozick's facility, there's a basement. You have to go down an elevator. It's not entirely unlike Aliens, The Dark Descent. You know, we have to get in our elevators all the time. How are you expected to descend into the dark in your Dark Descent if you can't get in an elevator to go down, right? Right? I don't know how many elevators exist in this game, but it seems like there's a lot. This elevator is sure important. In Dawn of War 1, Tyranids technically weren't a thing, but they were added later in mods. But even in mods, they were little more than workers. They're the equivalent to Gretchens, to server skulls, the Necron Scarabs, the Bone Singers for the Eldar. They were essentially a worker unit. They were bottom tier unit. In Dawn of War 2, Rippers were like a very low tier melee unit. They were even lower tier than Hormagaunts. Hormagaunts are actually pretty high tier when compared to Rippers. Most people don't really know much about Rippers. Rippers have not been shown in many video games. They've been shown in a couple of the tabletop turn-based style Warhammer games. They made their first major debut in Dawn of War 2. Most people had never seen or heard of a Ripper because they just frankly, as far as media is concerned, Rippers didn't exist. Rippers made their debut in Dawn of War 2. And they weren't that dangerous. They weren't that much of a threat. In fact, they were kind of silly because even the Hormagaunts were fast and could swarm you and cover you and surround you and actually block you. Rippers couldn't even really block you, so your Space Marines could actually just walk through them. In Dawn of War 1, Rippers are like a worker unit. They do all your building, which is kind of weird, but that's how the game mechanic works. It needs a builder, otherwise you can't build your buildings. And this unit was chosen as the builder. The models used in Dawn of War 1, I think, come from modified ones that were procured from Dawn of War 2. So when Rippers were first debuted in Dawn of War 2, their models got moved into Dawn of War 1 via mods. Tyranids never showed up in Dawn of War 3, as everyone knows. But they did show up after that in another Warhammer game with a name that I can't quite remember at the moment, but it's a turn-based one. It's more similar to the true tabletop than any of the live-action games or whatever. This, what I'm looking at, is hell on earth. I've never seen Rippers depicted like this. Because normally they're not. In fact, my deep, biased impression of Rippers is a very weak worker unit. A worker unit that is easy to kill. It's kind of slow. Doesn't do any damage. In Dawn of War 2, it's like a junk melee unit that even the AI never used, because the AI would just skip it and go straight to Hormagaunts. You never saw Rippers. In fact, the only reason Rippers existed were to help Spore Mines, because Spore Mines were so slow that if they didn't have something faster in front of them with a higher threat threshold, the Spore Mines would never get there. They would never make to the target, because the Marines would just kill them too fast. They would kill the Spore Mines when they were by themselves. So Rippers, gameplay mechanic-wise, Rippers were introduced in Dawn of War 2 as a kind of melee, fast, weak melee unit that helped the slow flying melee unit by tanking for it. It was cheaper to make Rippers than it was to make Spore Mines, which is weird because you'd think that the Spore Mines would be cheaper, and technically speaking they were, but because you had to spend resources like maxing out the squads, in grand total, the resources that you got for the damage was better in Spore Mines. Spore Mines do more damage than Rippers, but they were economically bad when compared to the Carnifex, because the Carnifex was just better. So you would never see Spore Mines, you would never see Rippers, you would just see Hormagaunts and Carnifex. They would go straight to Carnifex. Once the Hormagaunts stopped working, they would make a couple of supplemental Termagaunts, and they would hope for the best until they could tech, and then they would tech to the Carnifex. And then they would give the Carnifex the Biocannon, and then that was kind of max tier. That was max tier Tyranid gameplay. It was all the AI knew how to do, it was all the players would do, because Rippers were just bad. They were not very useful. They were a very bad melee unit. They weren't very good. They were cheap. They did no damage. That's my memory of Rippers, okay? I want you to remember that when I look at this, because when I look at this, everything that I knew about Rippers, or everything I thought I knew about Rippers, has just flown out the window, has on magical gargoyle wings, because this is insane. When I look at this, I don't see Rippers. What I see are rats, and I know that the game devs are going to hate this, but basically all this reminds me of is a video game that some of you may have never played. It's called A Plague Tale. It's about a fantasy era universe that is essentially depicting like medieval Europe, basically, or some magical derivative of medieval Europe. And a plague comes, and this plague comes and it kills people with a plague, but when the plague infects the rats become the antagonist of the story. So the ground gets covered in rats. They're afraid of light, so you use light sources to keep them away. If your light source runs out, then they encircle you and do damage. You could avoid the rats by hiding up on top of tables and things. But at the very end, when the rats begin reaching critical mass, they form these tornadoes. And I couldn't help but notice the tornado that I saw in the hallway, and that was nightmarish. And so when I look at this, This is nightmarish. For those of you that are having problems identifying what they actually are, they kind of look like zoanthropes. They're like little teeny tiny baby zoanthropes. They have like a little tail that they squirm around on, kind of like a hydralisk. And they have a big head and a small back. And so what you're looking at is they have like a xenomorph brain type head shape. It's not as big as the zoanthropes, but it's similar in its shape style. And so they squirm around on their tail, and they use their 6 little teeny tiny crab limbs to scratch, and then they use their mouths, which are filled with teeth, to bite you. That's what a ripper is. That's what it looks like anyway. This is insane. This is reminding me of a Plague Tale. This is reminding me of a Plague Tale 2. When I look at this makes my skin crawl. Because, how could it not? There's way too many things moving. If anything, some of them seem too fast. So when I look at some of them, like I try to follow one, right? And I lost it. I don't know where he went. But basically, there's this insane number of these things, and they all have their own fucking movement. But they also have a herd mentality. So you see there that a whole bunch of them decided that they're just going to randomly go that direction. If you watch really carefully, you'll actually see the movements in the units. This is called a herd behavior. Those of you that don't know what a herd behavior is, a herd behavior, at least from my understanding in StarCraft 2, a herd behavior is basically a unit. So let's pretend there's like one little thresher here, ripper here, right? And he makes a call for help. And he calls for help, and that circle of help is only a small circle. In that small circle, there's a % chance that some of them will answer that call for help. And there's an even smaller % chance that some of them, not only are they going to answer that call for help, but they're also going to make their own call for help. That's how you achieve this look. So you'll notice that there's these big balls, big swarms. They move around together in groups on occasion like this, right? You can tell the ones that are going this direction. And then they all abruptly change their direction. So you got a group that's going over there that was going that way. At the same time, this group is coming down here, right? So this group's kind of its own thing. The middle group over there is kind of staying where it is. And this group is moving all over the place. The ones back there seem to be moving a lot. Like you can see there is a pattern in their movements, and it's not unanimous. It couldn't be, because if it was, then it would look like Zerglings in StarCraft 2 all going the same direction all the time. And that's not the effect they wanted. So when they came and did this, to come and look at this, and said, hey, do we want this to be like Zerglings, or do we want this to be like the rats from the Plague Tale? I have a strange suspicion that a Plague Tale had a big influence over how this works, because it looks exactly the same. It has the same feeling vibes. And it's even more interesting to me that the herds are going different directions at the same time. Because that implies that there's multiple behaviors going on at the same time. There's 2 major groups now. There's this group here that's kind of hanging out because I think they kind of know we're here. And then there's this secondary group that's moving around all over the place. It's almost as though they're trying to find a way to get us. I don't know if I'm ever going to get to see this again, so I'm just kind of enjoying it. Figured it would give me time to finish rolling some joints. Figured it'd give me some time to drink some coffee. Get myself mentally prepared for the hell on earth that I'm about to jump into. And with that, let that be the intro for this climactic battle. Is it actually killing any of them? Or are they just running from it? Seems like they can get away from it in time. Oh my god, there's the rat tornado.